If I recall correctly, and I'm sure many of these people will be able to answer more clearly than I.
At 94 years old, William Shatner is still one of Hollywood's most fascinating figures. But behind the confident smile and decades of success, there's a private story he's kept mostly hidden. Until now, Shatner has finally started opening up about the secrets he's carried for years. Join us as we uncover the untold story of William Shatner's secret life. A serious boy with outsized ambition. William Shatner's story starts long before starships and convention stages. He was born on March 22, 1931, in the Notre-Dame-de-Grâce neighborhood of Montreal, Quebec, into a conservative Jewish family that valued hard work, order, and respect. His parents, Anne and Joseph Shatner, ran a stable middle-class household. Joseph was a clothing manufacturer, serious about business and reputation, while Anne was strong-willed, social, and proud of their roots. Shatner was not just a daydreaming kid, he was put to work young. He joined the Montreal Children's Theatre, a respected training ground, where he learned lines, hit marks, and took direction with grown-up seriousness. He also did radio and early CBC work, gaining real professional experience while other children were still treating performance like a game. This was important. Shatner didn't stumble into acting. He treated it as a job from the beginning. Directors and teachers noticed a boy who was focused, controlled, and hungry to get it right. These early performances trained him in two key skills. First, projection. He learned how to fill a space with his voice and presence, to sound certain even if he was nervous. Second, control. He understood how to hold attention and how to make small choices, pauses, emphasis, and posture that made him look like the natural center of the scene. Later, people would mock or celebrate his unusual speech patterns, but underneath that was a technique he had been building since childhood, using rhythm and intensity to pull you in. Still, acting did not look like a safe life path, and the Shatner household respected safety. So, in a move that says a lot about his character, William followed a sensible route, without letting go of the risky one. He studied commerce at McGill University in Montreal, graduating with a Bachelor of Commerce in 1952. The choice of business was not random. It reflected both family expectations and his own awareness that success in the arts was uncertain. While taking classes in economics and management, he stayed close to performance, working summer theater jobs and staying active in the acting world. This double track, business brain, actor's heart, became a pattern. Shatner learned to hedge his bets. He wanted to act, but he also wanted a safety net. He never fully trusted that fame, if it came, would stay. That quiet fear of suddenly losing everything would later shape his decisions, including his willingness to say yes to projects that others might have turned down. To understand the always working, always hustling Shatner of later years, you start here. A young man who sees stability as something you earn and then fight to keep. After McGill, he committed fully to the craft. Shatner joined the Stratford Shakespeare Festival in Ontario, the most serious possible environment for an ambitious young actor in Canada. At Stratford, he was not a star. He was an understudy, a supporting player, a worker among giants. But this is where he forged his reputation. He became known as hyper-prepared, endlessly rehearsed, and sometimes intense to the point of exhaustion for those around him. He watched leading men closely, learned blocking and text with precision, and was ready to step in at a moment's notice. When he finally did, famously going on for Christopher Plummer in Henry V, he didn't just copy. He played the role his own way, signaling a strong sense of self, even in another man's shadow. And from here, things start to move fast, because the hard-working kid from Montreal is about to fight his way into the role that will change everything. Building the Shatner myth. By the time William Shatner became Captain Kirk, He had already spent years fighting for space on screens that did not yet care who he was. The 1950s and early 1960s were his training ground and stress test. Constant work, low pay, and a lingering fear that he could be replaced at any moment. After Stratford, he moved steadily into television during what was then the rough, unforgiving world of live and anthology drama. He appeared in series such as Studio One, Playhouse 90, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, and other episodic shows that demanded precision and nerve. One take, minimal safety net, and no room for mistakes. He also took roles in feature films like The Brothers Karamazov and a string of smaller projects. None of it made him a star, but all of it made him extremely efficient. He became known for learning pages of dialogue quickly, hitting marks exactly, and taking control of a scene without hesitation. Shatner had already appeared in another Twilight Zone episode, Nick of Time, also playing a man under psychological pressure. Those roles showed casting directors something important. He was not about subtle understatement. He brought charge, rhythm, and a kind of controlled panic. That quality made him memorable, even when the role was small. So when Gene Roddenberry needed a new lead for a risky science fiction show, after NBC rejected the original pilot with Jeffrey Hunter, Shatner fit the need. The network liked the idea of Star Trek, but wanted a different tone and a more accessible and engaging captain. Shatner was brought in to play James T. Kirk for the reworked pilot Where No Man Has Gone Before, and then the series. His job was clear: anchor a challenging, sometimes talky show that mixed action with philosophy and keep it watchable for a broad audience. He approached Kirk with intention. Shatner built the character around three pillars. First, swagger. Kirk moved and spoke as if he trusted his own judgment completely. Second, warmth and sentiment. He showed care for his crew, loyalty to his friends, and belief in ideals, which softened the bravado. Third, a strong, almost theatrical cadence shaped by his classical training. He broke up lines, leaned on certain words, and used pauses to keep attention on him. It was not random. It was a performance style designed to make Kirk feel larger than the frame. Over time, Shatner and Kirk fused in the public mind. The myth of Shatner, bold, dramatic, and unshakably sure of himself, was built on how he chose to play this role. Behind the scenes, the story was less clean. Fellow actors, including some from the bridge crew, later complained that Shatner pushed for more lines, more close-ups, and narrative focus on Kirk, sometimes at their expense. Over the years, Shatner himself has half admitted that he was often unaware or unwilling to see how his behavior affected co-stars, and he has said that his insecurity and focus on survival made him self-centered during that time. These tensions helped start his reputation as a man who was both a committed professional and, at times, a difficult, ego-driven colleague. Then, in 1969, Star Trek was canceled after 3 seasons of modest ratings and network frustration. What saved him in the long run was the slow rise of Star Trek fandom. As reruns built a devoted audience, conventions began to appear. The show's world grew, even though no new live-action episodes were airing. Shatner returned as Kirk in Star Trek, the animated series, and then in a run of feature films starting with Star Trek, the motion picture. He also leaned into public appearances, signings, and later promotional work tied to the franchise. In the 1980s, he pushed back into mainstream television with T.J. Hooker, playing a tough police sergeant and hosting Rescue 9/11, which kept him in front of a wide weekly audience. These shows were not prestige dramas, but they kept him working and visible, and they reminded the industry that he could lead a series outside of Star Trek. The real twist came in the 2000s with Denny Crane on The Practice and Boston Legal. Here, Shatner played an aging, vain, outrageous lawyer who was at once ridiculous and strangely sympathetic. He used his public image, the ego, the odd speech, and the sense that he knew we were watching William Shatner, and turned it into sharp comedy and pathos. The role won him 2 Emmys and a Golden Globe. It was not an apology for who he was. It was a smart decision to own it. He turned self-parody into a tool, not a weakness, and proved that he could still surprise people decades after Kirk. By the end of this rise and fall and rise rhythm, we see a clear pattern. Shatner builds his career on control, visibility, and refusal to step aside. And that same drive will collide head-on with his private life, his marriages, and the people who get close to him next. Control, chaos, and companions. William Shatner's love life runs alongside his career like a second storyline. Intense, fast-moving, and full of control on the surface with a lot of mess and pain underneath. His first marriage, to Canadian actress Gloria Rand, began before the chaos. They married in 1956, when he was still a working actor, not yet Captain Kirk. Together they had 3 daughters, Leslie, Elizabeth, and Melanie. During the early years, he was the classic busy husband. Long days, constant hustle, determined to provide. But once Star Trek started in 1966, the distance grew. Shatner has said in his autobiography that he was on set all the time, exhausted, and that the marriage became, in his words, lopsided. He felt little joy at home, she had her own resentments, he was surrounded by new admirers and opportunity. By his own account, he was not good at being married in this period. He left Rand while still working on Star Trek, the original series, and they divorced in 1969, the same year the show was canceled. The story matters because it cracks the good provider picture he liked to project. Professionally, he was playing a loyal, decisive leader. Privately, his ambition and ego were already taking priority over stability. The split with Gloria shows a pattern that never really leaves him. Work first, emotional damage later. In 1973, he tried again. Shatner married actress Marcy Lafferty, daughter of TV executive Perry Lafferty. This became his longest marriage, lasting until 1996. These were the uneven years of his career, post-Star Trek typecasting, experimental projects, then new visibility with T.J. Hooker, movies, and growing convention fame. Marcy was often at his side in public. She helped raise his daughters. They shared a serious involvement in horse breeding, a world that mattered more and more to him over time. From the outside, this marriage looked like a solid partnership. Red carpets, shared interests, mutual projects. Inside, by his own later descriptions, it was relatively amicable even in ending, but shaped by his schedule and self-focus. There were no children together, and his career needs still took up most of the space. The divorce terms famously included an unusual agreement related to their horses, a sign of how entangled their shared work and assets had become. That detail underlines a key trait. Shatner built relationships into his larger personal empire: work, image, horses, and branding. And when the relationship ended, he managed it like another contract. Then came Noreen Kidd, and the tone changed. Shatner met her in the mid-1990s, a much younger model and actress whose beauty and charm hit him hard. They married in 1997. From the start, Noreen's struggle with alcoholism was central to their story. Friends, including Leonard Nemoy, warned him. Shatner later admitted he knew about her addiction, but believed he could help her stop. This is where his need for control runs into something he cannot bend to his will. Noreen went to rehab multiple times. Shatner has described hiding bottles, confrontations, fear, and repeated attempts to support her recovery. Still, the drinking continued. In interviews and in his book, he talks about loving her deeply and feeling helpless as she slid back into addiction. Their relationship was intense, unstable, and emotionally charged. His desire to rescue, her illness, public pressure, career obligations, and the very real danger around them. It ended in 1999. After that loss, His final major partnership came with Elizabeth Anderson Martin, a horse trainer and photographer. They married in 2001. This relationship looked calmer and more grounded. They shared a deep love of horses, worked together on equestrian events and charity, and presented as an easy, affectionate pair at public appearances. For a long stretch, this was the softest chapter of his personal life. An older Shatner, with a stable home base, a partner linked to his biggest non-acting passion, and fewer public scandals. In late 2019, he filed for divorce. It was finalized in early 2020 after 18 years of marriage. Even here, the split was handled in a controlled way. Negotiated settlement, shared focus on their horses and properties, and no explosive public fight. But the story did not end there. In the years that followed, they continued appearing together at events, and interviews and reports indicated they had reconciled. By 2024, Shatner was again publicly referring to Elizabeth as his wife, and outlets reported that they were living together and, in effect, remarried, even without a new legal ceremony. That last detail captures something important about him. Shatner does not like endings. Careers that should wind down keep going. Public images that should soften get pushed louder. Relationships that are technically over circle back into his life. Across Gloria, Marcy, Noreen, and Elizabeth, you see the same themes. A man driven by work, often absent, often self-protective, but also genuinely hungry for connection and unwilling to let go of the people who matter to him, even when the story turns dark. And as his love life grows more complicated, the collisions between his private choices, public image, and deep personal tragedies only get sharper in what comes next. The death of Noreen Kidd. On the night of August 9, 1999, William Shatner's life broke apart in a way he has never stopped talking about. He came home to their house in Studio City, Los Angeles, after a trip to Orange County. At around 10:15 p.m., he walked into the backyard and saw his wife, Noreen Kidd Shatner, at the bottom of the pool. She was naked, not moving. He jumped in, pulled her out, and tried to revive her with CPR while calling for help. Paramedics arrived, but there was nothing they could do. Noreen was 40 years old. From the start, the official response was cautious. Police at the scene said there were no obvious signs of foul play and described the case as an apparent accidental drowning, pending the autopsy. Shatner, visibly shaken, spoke briefly to reporters outside the house, calling Noreen his beautiful wife and saying she had meant everything to him. Those images traveled quickly, and so did questions. The public knew Noreen had a history of alcoholism. They also knew Shatner had once filed for divorce before reconciling with her. That mix of drama, addiction, and celebrity made the story explode. When the autopsy results came in, they gave a clear but painful picture. Noreen had a very high blood alcohol level, more than 3 times the legal limit for driving, along with Valium in her system. There were injuries consistent with diving or falling into the pool and striking her head or neck, which likely left her unconscious in the water. Based on the toxicology and physical findings, the Los Angeles County coroner ruled her death an accidental drowning. The LAPD said there was no evidence of foul play and closed the case. Still, rumors came fast. Some commentators and tabloids pushed the idea that Shatner might somehow be involved, even though he had a time-stamped restaurant receipt and witness statements placing him away from the house when she drowned, and even though investigators said he was not a suspect. His fame shaped the coverage. This was not treated as a private family tragedy. It was handled as a crime story until proven otherwise. Shatner later said that hearing people suggest he might have killed his wife added another layer of horror to a moment when he was already in shock. Over time, Shatner has given more of his own version in interviews and in his books. He has spoken openly about Noreen's alcoholism, the hidden bottles, the failed treatments, the fear every time she drank, and his feeling that he could not reach her despite his money, access, and determination. In his 2018 memoir, he wrote about the night of her death as a moment of such intense pain that he briefly thought about taking his own life. He has described going over all the what-if questions. What if he had been home? What if he had pushed harder? What if he had done something different? The way he tells it, he is a desperate husband who loved his wife, tried to save her from herself, and arrived too late. And as his life moves forward from this point, those same needs for control, survival, and reinvention keep shaping how he handles challenges, conflicts, and accusations still to come. The $170 million question. In the middle of William Shatner's long public life, one of the strangest and most uncomfortable chapters came from a man who was sure Shatner was his father and refused to let the claim go. Peter Sloan, a Florida radio host, was born in 1956 and adopted as an infant. As an adult, he began searching for his biological parents. He has said that his birth mother, Canadian actress Kathy McNeil, told him she'd had a brief relationship with William Shatner in Toronto in the 1950s, and that Shatner might be his father. Over the years, Sloan tried to contact Shatner, claimed they once met on the set of T.J. Hooker in 1984, and later said Shatner privately acknowledged him and then backed away. Shatner has consistently denied that any such admission happened and has denied having any son at all. By 2016, the conflict had moved from private efforts and fan circuit conversations into a headline-making legal clash. Sloan, by then also using the name Peter Shatner professionally, filed a lawsuit in Florida seeking $170 million in damages. He claimed defamation, libel, and related harms based on Shatner's public denials and statements from Shatner's representatives that he considered false and damaging. He also asked the court to compel a DNA test and to stop Shatner from denying paternity. The dollar figure was enormous: $30 million in compensatory damages, $90 million in punitive damages, and $50 million for emotional harm, plus recognition. From Sloan's side, this was framed as a fight for truth and reputation. From Shatner's side, it looked like a publicity-driven claim built on a weak foundation. Shatner's legal team responded firmly. They repeated that Shatner was not his father, stressed that Shatner already had 3 daughters and no son, and treated the case as baseless. The case was removed to federal court, and in 2017, the judge dismissed Sloan's lawsuit. The court found that Sloan's own pleadings did not support his defamation claims strongly enough, and that there were jurisdiction and factual problems. There was no order forcing Shatner to take a DNA test. There was no legal recognition of Peter as his son. In the eyes of the law, Shatner walked away clean, still publicly denying paternity, still protected by the principle that you are allowed to say someone is not your child if there is no proof that statement is false. The story did not end there for Peter. Despite losing in court, he went ahead and legally changed his name to Peter Shatner in 2019. Vice. In 2020, after using commercial DNA testing and working with a genealogist, he publicly acknowledged that he had identified another man, now deceased, as his biological father, not William Shatner. Even with that conclusion, he kept the Shatner name, saying it had become part of his life. The Leonard Nemoy rift. William Shatner and Leonard Nemoy did not start as enemies. For most of their lives, they were linked in a way that went far beyond 2 actors sharing a TV show. They worked together even before Star Trek, appearing in the same 1964 episode of the man from UNCLE, and then became the core of the Enterprise crew from 1966 onward. Their chemistry on screen, Kirk and Spock, emotion and restraint, grew out of a real bond. Over the years, they shared sets, press tours, long convention weekends, and many private moments. Nemoy was close enough to stand as best man for Shatner at a later wedding, and Shatner often called Nemoy his brother in public. But from the beginning, that bond sat inside a competitive frame. Both men were ambitious. Both cared about status and story focus. When audience attention shifted heavily toward Spock, there was pressure. Nemoy later talked about sibling rivalry between them, and others on set recalled disputes over screen time, lines, and billing. Shatner has, in his own books, acknowledged that he could be self-absorbed and not always sensitive to how his behavior affected co-stars. The real break came late. Shatner has said that at some point in the last 5 years of Nemoy's life, Nemoy stopped taking his calls and cut off contact. Shatner claims he never got a clear explanation. One reported trigger, mentioned in Shatner's own later comments, was that Nemoy was upset Shatner had used footage of him in a project without proper permission. Nemoy never publicly detailed his side, and his family has stayed vague, confirming strain, but not the exact cause. The result is a painful gap, a friendship presented for years as deep and unshakable that quietly collapsed before one of them died. Then came the funeral. Leonard Nimoy died on February 27, 2015, at 83. Shatner was in Florida for a Red Cross charity event at Mar-a-Lago and said he could not get back to Los Angeles in time for the service. He announced this on Twitter, calling it a terrible conflict and urging fans to celebrate Nemoy online. Reuters and other outlets reported his explanation. But public reaction was harsh. Many people asked why a man who had called Nemoy his brother could not drop everything. Later, Shatner added another layer, writing that it had been made clear to him through channels that he was not welcome at the funeral, which deepened his feeling of hurt and confusion. His daughters attended in his place, and from here, the picture of an aging Shatner, famous, stubborn, and still in motion, gets even more complicated once his own body and mortality step into the story. Body under siege. William Shatner has built a career on energy, control, and refusing to slow down. But his body has not come through untouched. For decades, he has quietly carried damage from the Star Trek years, long before the headline health scares of old age. One of the most persistent problems is his tinnitus, a constant internal noise that he traces back to a special effects explosion during the original series, often cited as happening while filming the 1967 episode Arena, when a blast went off much closer than planned. The ringing did not fade. Over time, it became a permanent condition. Shatner has described periods where the sound pushed him toward despair, and later, the long process of learning to live with it through therapy, sound treatment, and sheer adjustment. Even while dealing with this, he kept acting, touring, recording, and appearing in front of loud crowds, pushing ahead as if endurance itself were part of the job. The tinnitus story matters because it shows how he handles vulnerability. He talks about it now with a mix of frankness and firmness. Yes, it is difficult. No, it has not beaten him. He has supported tinnitus awareness campaigns, appeared in educational materials, and used his name to draw attention to a condition many people ignore or hide. But even as he shares these details, he does it in a way that keeps his core image intact. He is the man who copes, manages, and keeps moving. The pain is real, but it is framed as another challenge he has mastered. Then, in 2021, at age 90, he went to space with Blue Origin's New Shepard NS-18 mission, becoming the oldest person ever to fly into space at the time. The flight was sold to the world as a perfect full-circle moment. Captain Kirk touches real space. After landing, he gave raw, emotional comments about the thinness of Earth's atmosphere and the stark darkness beyond. It strengthened the idea of Shatner as indestructible and still in command of extraordinary experiences. Physically daring, publicly sharp, still working non-stop. Mortality, for the audience, stayed abstract. That changed with his Stage 4 melanoma revelation in 2024. At the American Academy of Dermatology meeting in San Diego, Shatner described discovering a lump near his right ear or cheek area and being initially told by a doctor that it was likely a blocked gland and nothing serious. When it continued to grow, he sought a second opinion. Surgery followed, and pathology showed Stage 4 melanoma. He then underwent immunotherapy with heavy fatigue but successful control of the disease. He did not specify the exact date of diagnosis, but framed the story around 2 points. Trust your instincts, and modern treatment saved his life. And he really does keep moving. In his mid-90s, he is still booking appearances, planning tours and live shows, signing at fan events, collaborating on books, experimenting with new media ventures, and staying loud on social platforms. Health scares, including recent reports about blood sugar issues, are quickly followed by sharp public statements saying he is fine and back at work. The pattern is always the same: acknowledge, deflect, reassure, and return to the stage. And knowing all that, the question that lingers is simple. When he keeps performing this version of himself, how much of the real man are we actually seeing? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more.